This next question is coming from, I believe it's Komdin Masumi. And I think this is where it starts to test your football knowledge a little bit. So I'll get into it here. It's how has the development of Kia Academy gone in the recent years? And when do you think they will start getting graduates into the top 5 European leagues? Also, are there any other interesting academies, or I'll add players in Iran?
Yeah, I think me and Yes are actually good people to ask about Key Academy because we've actually watched quite a bit of Key Academy. We worked at Nordensa, which we won't go into now. I mean, we did in some other episodes in the past, but we watched players from all over the world there. And Key Academy are a really cool academy in Iran. They're founded by Mehdi Madaveki, which is probably a player who Yasek knows the best out of us. I remember him a little bit from his final years at Hasfo, but he's, I mean, a true legend of Asian football. He had over 100 appearances for Iran, played over 300 matches at HSV, and this was a HSV in a really elite period. They were one of the top sides in German football back then, so an absolutely incredible career. And he then basically went back to Iran in his homeland and founded academy purely on the basis of developing players into European football. That's kind of his mission. So they have a first team, but they compete in the third tier of Iranian football, so a very low level. And it's not even really about the first team; it's more so about the academy teams. The academy teams are always really fuel for the Iranian national team. So when we're talking about the U17 World Cup that was held in 2023, a lot of members of that squad were from the Kia Academy. And I mean, we can get into some of those names. Guys like Nina Anjas, who's an 18-year-old fullback. He's actually made that step to Europe. So he's playing at the youth teams of Leganes now in Spain. So he's kind of an example of what Kia stands for. He was a very good defensive fullback, in my opinion. Very physically robust, good bots to bots energy, strong tackler. He's not necessarily a player who's gonna wow you with trickery or skill, but especially for his age, he's very complete. Then another player, Amireza Islam Talab, much more interesting player, I would say, to watch than Andas. He's a flamboyant winger, a lot of 1v1 trickery and skill. He's very strong in tight spaces. But when we talk about Iranian football, he's a good example of kind of the difficulties and struggles that a lot of Iranian players have to face with. So it's very hard for Iranian players to get visas in Europe. And in general, just there's a lot of economic sanctions against Iranian players and against Iranian people in general. So just migrating to Europe in general is super difficult for these players. And that's why you see a lot of them end up in kind of these Asian leads, like for example the Qatar lead, UAE, Saudi Pro lead. These are kind of the leads that they end up going to, and obviously these are good leads. There's a lot of money in these leads as well, so it's very good for them. But there's this very hard pathways into Europe for these players, and that's kind of what we saw with Islam Tlab also. He's playing right now at Gol Gohar in the Persian top flight. So again, it's a good level. It's a professional level. He's probably earning much more than anybody in his family has ever earned, right? So you can't ever discredit the player or hold it against them. But obviously, it's just not the same as a move to Europe. And I think it's why we never actually hold Iranian football in that high of a regard because they're actually a very good footballing nation, but they're just not necessarily producing players that are in our view because they don't play in the European leagues, they don't play in the Champions League. They're more so tend to play in these top Asian competitions.
Yes, we even wanted to bring one very talented center back from Iran last year. We scouted him with Adam, and he was more than ready to play in a decent European league. Sadly, we struggled with all this, let's say, passport legal issues to bring an Iranian player to Europe. And yeah, he went to Qatar, and he probably earns a lot of money, but he won't develop as well as he would in Europe. I always say that Europe is like NBA for a basketball player. If you want to be better, you need to go to Europe. And as for Kia Academy and Mehdi Madavikia, it brings memories first of all. So Mehdi Madavikia, Ali Day, Vahid Hashemian, Ali Karimi. So all these Iranian legends during my childhood or my younger days. And I think Kia Academy is a very positive thing. You can see so many players in the youth teams coming from Kia Academy, and then all these players going to decent clubs either in Europe or in Asia. So very positive, but I don't want to be too much positive because I was already very positive on Mohammed VI Academy during our Morocco episode, and suddenly Watt told us that it's not as great as it looks from outside. So, in my opinion, yes, I stay positive about that project. But yeah, I'm not going to say more. Just one of the players that impressed me a lot. Of course, there was Nima Andars, who was very solid at the World Cup. I would say solidity was the best word. He wasn't really the most enjoyable player to watch. There were no fireworks in attack, but he was on a certain level, and I respected that a lot because at the youth level to stay consistent is probably the most difficult thing. But the only player of this team, and he was also in Kia Academy that I made a report on the website, was Kasra Taheri. So a very elegant center forward, fast, who liked to attack from the wing. I compare him to Darwin Nunes in my report, but he was definitely a player that caught my eye the most back then. Right now, he's in Rubin Kazan, so let's say not my favorite direction, but I still hope that we will see him in Western Europe in the coming years.
Yeah, and I think the Russian pathway you mentioned there is also, again, like we're saying, it's just such an issue for these Iranian players. Like back then, it was at least possible to then go from Iran to Russia and then to Western Europe. We saw a guy like Salah Azmoun do that, going from Zenit to Bayer Leverkusen then. But even this pathway is now increasingly difficult. There's fewer and fewer players being signed from Russia. So yeah, it goes to show the plight that Iranian football has.